My name's Jessica Hische, and I'm an illustrator, lettering artist, and author.
Welcome to the Picturebooking Podcast. Here's your author, illustrator, and host, Nick Patton.
Hey, Picturebook people. Thank you for listening to the show today. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe to Picturebooking on your podcast app and discover more at picturebooking.com. Now it's time to go inside the Mulville Library studio on the campus of St. Norbert College for today's talk. Enjoy. Just to begin, what attracted you to the idea of making picture books? Because obviously you've been designing for a long time. You've had a lot of success with your lettering. What attracted you to this medium?
So I think it's so funny, as a person who draws anything ever. I think even from when you're a kid, you get asked like, "Oh, do you think you'll ever make a children's book someday?" I think it's just like such a accessible medium to people, or they feel it's accessible. And so when I started getting really interested in doing illustration, I think like children's books are such a gateway to illustration for so many people. And a lot of people that are not from within the art and creative field don't actually understand the place that illustration plays in like all other industries. So one of the first questions you get when you say, "I think I'm going to be an illustrator," is, "Oh, so you're going to illustrate children's books?" And my answer, like way back then, was like, "I don't know." Yeah, I didn't have I did a children's book project when I was in college, and I loved it. It was really fun. But I felt so like a fish out of water in that field, just because like when you graduate college, you know, you're 22, 23, whatever, you feel very separated from the person that you were as a little kid. And you're not spending a lot of time with little kids and like reading children's books often, other than just like picking them up because you love some illustrator that you like, but you're not really paying attention to the words as much. And I felt so kind of averse to going near picture books until I felt like I had a stronger connection just to them in general. So once I had my daughter and was just surrounded by picture books all the time and got a better sense of kind of what was out there and reconnected with some of the books that I had when I was a kid. And really like the biggest thing was having an understanding that it's not this like limited field and that there's like, oh, there's too many books. Like there's too many books out there. Nobody should be making more books. We should just be celebrating all the books that are already there. There's sort of like a bottomless pit of need for children's books. You know, like as a parent, you can buy 300 books and get so tired of them within like 2 weeks. And that's why everybody is suddenly rediscovering the library when they have children, because you're just like, you need access to thousands of books in order to, you know, keep everybody engaged in reading and make bedtime interesting and, you know, cover all the topics that they want to do. And that was really freeing, you know, sort of understanding that like whatever I made, it would find an audience and it wouldn't be like the market wasn't so saturated that it wouldn't find a place.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. Yes. And the library is your best friend. I mean, because that's the deal. You go to the library, you pick up 15, 20, 50 books, whatever it is, and you just burn through those things so fast. Oh,
totally. And a lot of it too, like you never know what's going to hit with your kid. You know, like you never know the book that is going to be like their book. And so you need to do a ton of trial and error. And it's really expensive to do that while purchasing books all the time. Purchasing books is, of course, great. I feel like it's actually the best gift that people can give to you as a parent, just because clothes are so subjective and they grow out of them and toys take up so much space. And a lot of people live in these like small apartments with no closets. And books just always have a place in a home, you know, so they just make a great gift. But when it comes to actually sort of getting your kid involved in the books that they're reading, like you might need something. My daughter got super interested in death, as like all kids do when they're like 3 and 4, and just finding like, let's get 5 books about things that die that she could be interested in for these like 6 months, and just seeing what kind of sticks on the wall is so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you like, you know, being an artist and a designer, are you trying to bring in lots of books in that you kind of liked, or were you just following what your daughter was interested in?
Well, that's the thing is, like, I definitely buy the books that I like by the people, the illustrators that I like. And I try to push those as much as I can just to be like, ooh, check out this beautiful thing. And some of them really do hit and some of them just don't. And you just kind of never know. And like the library book that my daughter was super into was about like a selfish girl named Margaret. And she just wanted to hear the word mine over and over again, So sometimes it's like, it has nothing to do with the beauty of the illustration. It just has to do with like silly content or, like a single word could be something that sparks for them. And it's just hard to know. But the thing that's good about that is that that like whatever you're making as an author and illustrator, it's going to hit for somebody. And that's the thing that's been sort of interesting with my book, because like I was definitely like reading and showing the early versions of Tomorrow I'll Be Brave to my daughter before it came out. And it just was not her book, and it was I was just waiting for it to come out. So then I'm like, oh my God, I need to hear from like a child that likes this book. Cause I'm not reading the book randomly before it came out to a lot of different children. And then it's been so great because I have so many other parents writing me being like, oh my God, my kid brings it to school every day. She won't put it down. I'm like, oh, thank God, because my kid wants to read the book about the bird dying,
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know, isn't it? Yeah. I got kind of the same deal where, I've done a couple books and neither one of them are a favorite of my kids. But but yesterday I was at that concert I was telling you about, and a parent came up to me there and said they had the book and they didn't realize that I was the guy who illustrated it until they, flipped to the end pages and realized, hey, that's the guy that came to the school the other day, and I didn't know he made this book. So it was kind of fun that like they read that story, but we don't. In my house, we don't read that story. It's just the way it is, I think.
I think it's also like, I think your kids thinking that whatever you're doing is just like passe or whatever starts very young.
Yeah.
Like my daughter's definitely like, she'll draw fancy letters and be like, look, Mom, I draw fancy letters too. Like, but that's about as much of the ideation that I get, or idealization I get from her so far.
That's
generally great. She's like, okay, Mom, whatever. I know that already. And she's only 4.5.
So you've been reading books and you got a sense that, this is something that you're now interested in pursuing, making your own picture books, making your own children's books. How does this idea for Tomorrow I'll Be Brave just like jump in your head and that's the thing? Or are you like working with a lot of ideas? How did that book start?
Well, that book started, Tomorrow I'll Be Brave and Tomorrow I'll Be Kind actually started at the same time. I didn't know they were going to start as 2 books initially, but the main thing that happened was our like only time that we were reading to our kids really was at bedtime. Because, in the morning, my daughter, when she was little, would sleep until 8:15, and then, or even later. So it was such a rush to get everything out the door. I have friends whose kids wake up at 4:30 in the morning and they do all of their reading in the morning. Mm-hmm. But like for us at that time, and even when my son was born, it was sort of like the morning just felt sort of like get stuff done, like stay on top of the chaos, not really a lot of downtime to really read and things like that. So bedtime was where it all shined. And so I read a lot of books at bedtime, and bedtime books specifically. And what I sort of was noticing with her is that, she was kind of aging out of a lot of the really simplistic board books really early and wanted stuff with story or just wanted stuff with more content to it. And it made me think that there's a lot of room for actually building in a lot more like complicated thought into really young kid books. And then I watched the Fred Rodgers documentary and I was just like, yes. And then felt so super inspired again of just like remembering that little kids, like preschoolers, have these like immensely complicated emotional lives. And they're just essentially like just as complex as we are as adults, but without any real way to like unpack it and figure it out. And I think too, like I was in therapy at the time. Like I always encourage people to spend at least a couple years of their life going to a therapist. It's like amazing. And I felt like that process helped me sort of figure out a lot of these like little tools that would have been so helpful to me when I was much younger. And so I feel like actually like I'm going to end up in this this zone of kids books. So that's just like me regurgitating things I've learned in therapy into kids books. But all of this together made me want to make a book that, you know, dealt with a topic that was a little more high level than like The Shape is Red or whatever. And then also was written for someone that was very similar to me as a kid, and also similar to how my daughter ended up being, which is someone that's like a little bit risk averse, is afraid to try new things because they are very concerned about making sure they're doing it the right way. There's someone that really likes to know like the rules of how things are going. You know, like she wasn't much of like a free play creative little kid. And I remember being really similar to that when I was really young, because I was just so worried about messing up. You know, like I was super concerned that I was going to draw the wrong way or that I was going to do something that wasn't the right way. And I wanted to make a book that was like encouraging, but also introduced the concept of just like self-forgiveness when you fail, and that like failure shouldn't discourage you from trying it again or enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. So that was sort of the broad strokes concept for it. And then I was trying to come up with all the words that I would want to hear as like words of encouragement, things that I would aspire to be. And I made this huge list. You know, it was like dozens of words. And then trying to cull that down to just a couple for a book was really difficult. So I ended up sort of separating them into these categories. And originally I thought I was going to have like way more categories. But the two that stuck out were these sort of like empowering words that are just for you, like things that help make your life and your day better and more rich. And then the other category was things that help you make other people's lives better. So it's like things that you do for yourself versus things that you do to help others. And so that's sort of how Tomorrow I'll Be Brave and Tomorrow I'll Be Kind happened. I started writing the manuscript of Tomorrow I'll Be Brave right away because I knew that I wanted that one to be the first one. I hadn't really thought why I wanted it to be the first one at the time, but it just felt right. And then ultimately when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, of course, this follows this pattern of like, take care of yourself before you take care of others. Like make sure you're in a good place before, so then you're the most capable of helping others. And so Tomorrow I'll Be Brave is all of these words like being brave and strong and adventurous, which are all amazing things to enrich your life, but don't really have much of an impact on other people around you. And then Tomorrow I'll Be Kind are all the things that you can do to actually really impact all the people in the world and do your part to sort of make the world a better place, like being kind, being honest, being patient, being generous, words like that. And then, so I sort of tabled kind for a while I worked on Brave, but I knew the words that I wanted kind to be, or just sort of generally the words that I wanted it to be. And then when I actually got through with Brave and started working on kind, it was so much harder of a project. It was like 10 times as hard as the Brave book was to both write and illustrate. Yeah, it was, and I can get into that too.
Really?
It was just so much more challenging. Yeah.
That's interesting. Because you thought, I mean, just looking at it from the outside, you thought, okay, you think the first book is going to be the one where you struggle to figure out, because it's such, it's beautifully paced, and, you know, it's got that, it's got such a nice flow to it, and it reads really nice as a read aloud, which you want with these small, you know, with small text, and it's got, you know, you feel like once you nail that down with that first book, you think that second book, you just be able to just say, all right, I know what this is going to be. you actually see what this thing is now. I can translate this to something else, right? And that was the hard part, huh?
Yeah, well, like part of it was wanting to make sure that I wasn't being too formulaic with the second book, you know, making sure that people weren't like, oh, like here is like a format or like an outline and you're just filling it in with different words. I didn't want that to be the vibe of the book. But one thing that I didn't anticipate before I started working on it was just, it's really difficult to write a book that deals with morality and not make it sound really preachy. And so I was really concerned about making sure the language felt very like light and aspirational, and not like it was like condemning bad behavior, or that it was like this goody two shoes, like 1950s, you know, sort of like preachy framework for being a good person. I really wanted to make kids feel empowered by it, instead of making them feel like some adult was sort of like telling them to be better because they were being bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I could see that, you see this sometimes in some book ideas where, in some books that get produced where, they've got a really great idea, but they don't have a great idea for 32 pages. They don't have a great idea that's going to, you end up sometimes literally repeating the same theme somehow.
Yeah, I get it. That sometimes the books in a series, there's ones that are stronger than others because some follow the formula too directly.
And
or feel like they're filling it in a little bit. Right.
Where you have like two kind of like, so each page in your kind book has a different way of being kind, right? And there's not really a repeated way where you have basically say kind twice in the same general way. Your book really does feel like each page has a moment where you should think about how this is going to make my life better and make the lives of the people I touch better.
And that was the thing that really made the difference between the Brave book and the Kind book as well, because all of the words in Brave are so immediate and concrete. Like, if you say the word strong, you know what it means. There's multiple meanings to it, but like, you don't actually have to explain it through the art quite as much. Whereas with kindness, I felt like because the words are more abstract, because these words like embody things that a lot of kids don't totally have a grip on right away, I had to illustrate it as much as possible. So the illustrations are like so much more complex in Kind. I actually was trying to total my hours for each of the books. And I think the first book took me somewhere around 200 or 250 hours, all things considered. And then the second book took almost 600, something like that, where I just spent so much more time on the art. The spreads normally, when I do artwork, I can get done a single piece of relatively complicated artwork in a total of about 8 to 12 hours, something like that. But I was finding that each of these spreads was taking me 25 to 30 hours or 40 hours sometimes, just because I'd have to keep I'd have to leave it alone and come back to it and edit it and add extra things and make sure that I wasn't repeating these things from spread to spread, that there was as many examples as possible in the book, because I wanted something that kids could revisit over and over again. I know that kids do that with all picture books, that you need to have layers so that when they read it again and again and again, there's something to discover that's new. But I feel like with kindness, it is something that kind of comes in a little bit later in that age range. You're not really teaching a 2-year-old very effectively on how to be kind. It's more sort of the 3 to 5 to 7 age range. Mm-hmm. And that's when they do sort of need to see examples over and over again to really get what it means to do these actions in their life and actually understand that it's small things and big things mixed together. It's not just always doing the biggest thing that you can do. Right.
And it's, for that age group, that can be a hard thing. It's something that as a parent, you're constantly trying to put that in front of them at certain moments. You're this isn't about you at this moment. But in that, whenever you're trying to teach them that what they did wasn't kind, or, how they could approach that in a better way, that's really hard to do in the moment. And I try as a parent, but you see no, this is about me. They're this is about me. I don't care. I don't care about my brother's feelings. That didn't matter to me. But when you separate that and you have this book like this where they can fall into a story and they can look at the pictures and they can see both sides of it a lot easier then, because it's separating their ego from it a little bit. So it's a great way of introducing these themes into and helping a child understand, right, what it means.
Yeah, and the thing that was fun for me, too, is one of my favorite spreads is the one that follows the generous page. So the way that the book works is that there's sort of these big lettering spreads that generally show a single kind of theme within it. And then there's a spread that follows that then expands upon it and shows alternate ways of doing that thing. And my favorite one in it is the one that follows generous, because it's all about all the ways that you can give to people and show love to them that are not necessarily just giving a gift. And the thing that I wonder if anyone will pick up from it when they see the book is that, are you familiar with the love languages?
No.
So there's like a book that came out that's like the 5 love languages, and it's a book for adults, and it's about like it's a self-help book essentially, and it's about how every person has a different way that they want to receive love and want to express love. And there's these 5 different languages, like one is gifts, one is acts of service, one is like physical touch, like hugs and things like that. One is just like proximity and closeness. And I tried to make sure that each of those were sort of represented on that page, because I found that so mind-blowing when I learned about that as an adult, because, you know, you think about if you have a family member or someone in your life that like is really focused on like getting a card or something in the mail, like, and they get so upset if they don't get a card, like their love language might be gifts. So it makes sense that then when they receive that card, they feel love stronger than if you did something like did the dishes for them or something like that. Whereas other people, like if you go out of your way to like, you know, take out the trash every day or whatever, like that might be the way that you feel the most love because you feel taken care of. And so I loved the idea of like taking this really like adulty thing and mixing it into this kid's book, because it's so fundamental to like how we go throughout the world, is like how we want to be loved and how we want to love other people.
Yeah. And that's, wow. I love that. And that just, I'm looking at the page right now and just listening to what you're saying there. And it's such I mean, that's so profound that you get to put that into a children's book and I'm just thinking through my life, you know, of the people in my life and it's so true that there's certain reactions that you get. Like if I would buy my mom flowers, it's a total dead end. That's not what she's looking for.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but if you spend time with her, if you get a project and you invite her in and she gets to help you with she just glows. She just loves that stuff. And so it's, yeah, that's so powerful that you can show, and in that illustration, you can show all these different kinds, and you can even talk to a child and say, some of your friends might really, you know, like this kind, like to show love this way. Some friends like to show love this way, and it's such an interesting thing.
Yeah, or like you point at the illustration of them doing the dishes, and you say, "Oh, I bet that made their mom so happy that they were being such a good helper." You know, like there's all these different things that you can point to the illustration that would affect you the most, and say, "Oh, I would, you know, you never have to get me a gift, but if you ever want to make me a drawing, I would love it." You know, like there's all these ways that you can sort of talk through things that you want out of your relationship with your kid too. And then ask them like, what would make you happy? You know, and a lot of times they'd be like, buy me a fancy unitard that has sparkles all over it. So
that's beautiful. I love it. This was kind of the idea, coming back to almost my first question. When you were looking at getting in the books, this idea just sort of overwhelmed you, and it's like, this is the thing that needs to happen, huh? Or did you have other ideas?
Like, this was the main one. I felt like it, like I definitely have other ideas for other books, but they didn't seem as like deep as this one. And this one really sort of haunted me and stayed with me for a long time. And I think that's always kind of a good sign, because I'm like my own best cheerleader on projects if I get really excited about them, as long as I can do them right away. But very few of those ideas sort of last for 6 months, a year, whatever. And I just felt so strongly about this for like, I got the idea when she was maybe like 9 months old and started kind of scheming on it. And I was still working on it, like on and off, when she was 1.5 years old. And I think I ended up selling it to Penguin around that time. And I felt like, I was like, I just need to get this book I need to actually work on this. I need to get this into the world. This is important. This isn't just some like random project I feel like working on. And that feeling really pushed me forward on it. And it made me feel like, oh, well, like I felt like I don't know if I felt like I hit the lottery or something with it, in terms of just like having that idea find you, or you finding that idea as like a first project. But I actually think part of it is it was just the time of my life I was at. I felt like it combined a lot of the things that I've already been doing and been interested in. Like I do a ton of like random mentorship within the design community as a as an illustrator designer. Like I sort of have my inbox is open to whoever writes me, and I write back with tons of like really deep advice to people that write me. And I've been in a like sort of in this design leader position for, like 8 or 10 years now. And it felt like a way for me to like bring that mentorship into this younger audience, and just felt sort of right,
Yeah, that's awesome. And all the levels there. I mean, from the story working well with your lettering, and then from the meaning of the story, from being able to tell a story through illustrations, it all sort of lined up in this beautiful way. And these books are, they're pretty amazing.
Well, thank you.
I find it really interesting, with the word tomorrow in this. Instead of just saying like, I'll be kind, you say tomorrow, tomorrow I'll be kind. So just tell me what tomorrow
I'll definitely walk you through that.
Yeah.
I'll walk you through what the tomorrow came from, because I actually would get in fights with a couple of friends of mine about it, because everybody kept being like, why is like, because I have this is like a total aside, but professionally I came up with this word called procrastinating, which is just like when you're working on something you shouldn't be working on because you're avoiding working on the thing you should be working on. But it came out of, I got interviewed when I was really way too young to have been quoted on this forever, which somebody asked me what advice I would give to young designers. And it was, the work that you do when you procrastinate is probably what you should be doing for the rest of your life. And it's sort of like letting those passions, as long as they're productive, guide your next step forward. And it doesn't have to mean like, your hobby that you're doing, or this thing that's totally unrelated to your work. It's even just paying attention to like, while you're working, what is the thing about your work that brings you joy versus what's the thing that is a drag, and trying to figure out how to do more of the joyful work more often, and sort of letting, like, you can turn a mediocre job into like a pretty decent job that way. And so when I was thinking about the book, I really wanted it to be Tomorrow I'll Be, because it's meant to be a bedtime book. And I didn't want it to be like this, like, I'm going to get up and go like right now, because the whole premise is like, you're going to be going to bed very soon. But what ended up happening through like this encouraging for tomorrow, we do it a lot as parents, like you think about when you're trying to get your kid to go to bed, if they're having a difficult time going to bed, you talk about all the good stuff you're going to do tomorrow, and how if they don't go to bed, they're not going to be able to do those things. Right. So it's like, oh, well, we got to go to bed now because tomorrow we're going to go to the zoo, and you don't want to be tired if we're at the zoo, or if you go to sleep now, the zoo will happen faster, And this idea of like getting excited about tomorrow at bedtime is something that I feel like was really natural for us. And I feel like it's probably natural for a lot of people, but in doing it, it also created this really good moment of like a closed loop reflection, because I wanted a way to like review the current day, but not have the whole book be like, what did you do today? Because then it's like, I don't know, it feels more limiting. So the premise is that you say all the things that you like hope to do tomorrow. And then the end of the book, which is, I think, the most powerful part of the book, is, tomorrow I'll be all the things I tried to be today. And if I wasn't one of them, I know that it's okay. But tonight I'm very sleepy, so now it's time to rest. Tomorrow I'll be all these things, or at least I'll try my best. And that's the ending of Tomorrow I'll Be Brave. And so the premise is like, you talk about tomorrow, but you also use that as a time to reflect about today and think about all the things that you were able to or not able to accomplish, and sort of give yourself a pass on the stuff you couldn't do, knowing that you have tomorrow to try again.
Yeah, I love it.
So with the kind book, it's a little bit different, because I couldn't just repeat that same 2 stanzas for the kind book, because the idea of forgiving yourself for not being kind is a little bit different. Right. You do want to have this like try your best, but the word, instead of all the things I tried to be today, it changed to I strive to be each day, which I think is a really big difference, because it shows that it's kind of hard to be these things sometimes. It's easy for some kids to just like try to be a little bit adventurous and like go down a big slide or something like that. But like really trying to be like generous and kind and patient. We have this Mo Willems book, Waiting's Not Easy. And it is like one of the top read books in our house, just because patience as a concept is like so difficult for little kids. And so the idea that it's like a thing you have to strive for that takes a little bit of work, I think was really important for the second book versus the first book. And it's one of the things that separates them.
Yeah. I feel like that word tomorrow really helped. I think it really, and throughout the words, reinforced this idea of just, it's definitely a growth mindset, right? Where you're
definitely.
You're where you're at now, and you're going to get a little bit better. And if you fail at it a little bit, that's all right. But because we're going to come at it the next day, and we're going to get a little bit better the next day. And we're going to be a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser because of what happened. And that whole idea that, to say I am kind is a bold statement, but this gives us that gives us, I think, the right mindset of growth, quite honestly. And I think
exactly. I think like a growth mindset's easier for children to maintain, but it's way harder to maintain over the course of your life. And I do feel like when you're writing a picture book that's meant to be a bedtime book, it's a read aloud. You're talking to both the kids and the adults. You're not just talking to the kids, because the adults are the ones that are reading it. And I think that I love the idea of making ways for adults to connect with their kids and like connect the things that their kids are learning to things that they too always have to learn and relearn. Because I think some of the things that we try to teach our kids are really hard for ourselves to actually implement in our lives. And we kind of have to be reminded that it is a thing that you have to keep working on and keep moving forward with. And that ultimately is good for everyone, because they say that we all get a more fixed mindset when we age. And that's one of the things that, sort of starts our decline instead of keeping that growth mindset, for sure.
Yeah. So the whole thing is very beautiful, but I want to dive into specifically the art and the lettering that you did in this kind book. Could you and I just want to go through your creative process as you're developing it. So I'd love for you just to pick out one word from the book that you found, the most fun or interesting to work on.
Sure. Oh man, it's going to be really hard to talk about which one is the most fun or interesting, because
I've got all day. We can just start at the beginning and work our way through if you want.
Well, I'll tell you one of the words specifically I enjoyed drawing, which is generous. And I just really liked drawing that one because of just the style that I chose to draw it in. I like to mix up the styles between the letter forms. Sometimes the style is really influenced by the actual concept of what's on the page. And sometimes it's a little bit more of me trying to make sure I have enough variety between the spreads and are showing things, in different styles between them so it doesn't feel too repetitive. But that one was really fun, just in how I was trying to make the letters interlock with each other. And the illustration on that one is a little bit more straightforward. It sits in front of the word instead of being integrated. Whereas a word like patient, the patient spread was, I'll walk you through how I sort of worked on that one, because that one was much more of a process because it has a lot going on in the background and foreground. So for that one, I always start with a sketch. I do my sketches on an iPad Pro now, but a lot of my early sketches look like they could just be done in pencil because I'm just drawing with the pencil tool on there in black and white. I get into color a little bit sooner on kids projects than I do on a lot of my other commercial lettering projects, just because color is really important to me in the kids' books. And so I started with that one by first sketching the background and the lettering. And then I actually went ahead and digitized the lettering in, I draw on top of my sketches in Adobe Illustrator. Mm-hmm. So all of my final art ends up being vector art. But it's all very painstaking and point by point. It's not like I push some button and it all gets drawn. It's essentially drawing it again from scratch. And then what I'll do is export my art from Illustrator and then sketch on top of it again to do a lot of the character work. So the characters and stuff end up coming a little bit later in the game on a lot of these spreads, just because I want to be able to have them interact with the art and have them sort of go in between them and behind them and feel like it's done in a way that feels kind of natural. So I'll work with like a very loose sketch of the characters on top of the finalized lettering art. And then I'll go in and either tighten the sketches and make them pretty tight, or just start sort of drawing on top of my looser sketches and getting everything in that way. So working in this way, kind of going back and forth between sketch and final and sort of drawing on top of final art sometimes has been really fun. And it makes, like, it drags out the process a little bit, but I feel more confident as I move forward while I'm working, instead of just sort of feeling like I'm done at the sketch stage with like all of the ideation. And then it's just about like doing the production on the final. It allows me to sort of integrate a lot more stuff as I'm working. And there's stuff that comes up through that process that then makes the book and the illustrations more rich. Like on the patient spread, I was obsessed with the little mole character that I drew. I was just like, and that wouldn't have come up if I had just done like just a sketch to begin with. And trying to come up with like the personality of all the different characters that are on the spread and like who those are meant to be in like the classroom like environment. Mm-hmm. That was just like a really fun second thing to it. And there's a lot of like little Easter eggs in the book that I feel like this book has a lot more Easter eggs than the first book does. Like on the spread where the bunny is cleaning up the mess that spilled, there's like a record on the shelf that's like Ziggy Stardust as an owl. And there's like a bunch of like random like little things that I feel like the adults will really like. On the honest spread, the honest one I really love just because dealing with honesty for kids, like a lot of people think it's just all about like not lying, but I really wanted the main spread to just actually being about being true to yourself and like listening to who you want to be in the world and not what other people want from you. So that's what that whole spread is about. But the snake character in it is dressed up as the dragon from the first book. And so I just really loved like being able to sort of pull in these little ties between the two books and things. It was really fun.
That's awesome. That's a really interesting process that you kind of almost finish. You finish a part of it, and then you get through the whole process. It sounds like at every step, you're making sure you're thinking creatively. There's not like a part of this process where you say, all right, now I'm just going to execute. I did the sketch. Now I just have to execute in that style that I do.
Yeah. And I like working that way sometimes, but with the kids' books, because the art has to be so much more layered and complicated and intricate. Being able to allow myself to work in a more like iterative way means that the art ends up being less flat in the end, like conceptually and content wise. Yeah.
And it gives you, it allows you like built in procrastination in that process, right? Where you,
oh, totally.
as you finish one thing, you get to spend, maybe you're working on it, you get to think, well, now, how do I want my characters to be? Well, it's not time to just flush them out. We're going to do that later. I'm going to finish these letters first. And that gives you time to just let that sit in the back of your head and have ideas just come up as, like when I do presentations for adults, I always talk about procrastination because I think it's important to build it into your life, because if you just say, all right, I got an idea, I'm going to go execute that idea, and you're just in tunnel vision all the way through to a finished product, it's not going to be as good as if you like go wander around somewhere and waste some time not thinking about it and then come back to it and see things differently.
Yeah.
So,
and I think if you put it in the perspective of like, everybody has times of the day that they're more effective at doing different kinds of things. Like, they understand that. Like, like everybody mm-hmm. has that period after lunch where like you're just brain dead and you can't work on anything that's super high level because you just need to be like tired for a minute and get your stamina back, right. And so I think like creatively, there's parts of every project that are just like that, where you're like, there's a part that's going to be like a big hill that you have to climb, that you have to be in the right headspace to be able to do it. And then there's the parts that are more automatic, and you have to sort of allow yourself to work on whatever you're going to be most efficient at that time in order to be able to like move forward. And so with a kid's book, one thing that's really nice is that the spreads can be in like different places at different times. So I could have like one where the lettering is already finalized and the characters are, and I can have another where there is no lettering, and so I'm really working on a lot of the characters, another where I'm really diving into the background stuff because I want to have a bunch of interesting stuff in the background. And that sort of variety allows me to ping back and forth between different parts of the project. And when, instead of, just sort of stopping entirely because I'm like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I need a break, whatever, I'll be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed with drawing characters, I'm going to draw a fence that's just repetitive. You allow yourself permission to do the thing that's a little easier if you need to, or just a little less like brain power focus.
Yeah, and you're not beating yourself down over, now I'm going to make all the sketches for this whole entire book. Or you're going to do, I don't know what, I'm going to do all the lettering for this entire book right now, and I'm going to start at the beginning and finish at the end. Just like letting it, you get this whole big project and you're saying, what can I do with the energy that I have right now? That's a fabulous way
exactly.
of working.
And I feel like that way of working and that way of thinking is so tied in to like the whole concept of the Tomorrow I'll Be Brave book. The idea of like playing to your strengths when you have those strengths, or like listening to your body, listening to your mind in the moment and doing the thing that you feel capable of doing and not being too stressed out if you can't that day because you'll have the strength to do it a different time. It's so useful. I actually ended up taking I got really into Pilates a couple years ago. And I still love it as an exercise form. But the thing that I loved about it is I tried to take yoga classes before that and was never into it because I'm a little bit of a competitive person. And I also get really focused on like achievement within a thing where I'm just like, oh, I have to hit the next level. I have to work at the next thing. Oh, I can't do the like easy stuff because I'm at this good now. I should be doing the harder stuff. And when I went to this one Pilates class, the instructor was like, oh, hey, I'm going to show you, here's level 1, here's level 2, here's level 3. Normally I'm level 3, but my hamstrings are tight today, so I'm going to do level 1. And that just simple, throwaway thing that she said, kind of blew my mind. Just giving yourself permission to do lower level stuff when you don't feel capable of doing the higher level stuff. And I brought that silly thing with me so hardcore into parenting, into handling postpartum depression, into trying to be back in my job after having a baby, all this kind of stuff. I feel like that really impacted me. And that, I think, actually is part of the core of why I felt so inspired with the Brave and the Kind books, of just giving people permission to pay attention to themselves and pay attention to what they feel capable of doing so that they can do their best. They really can do their best. You're always trying to just do your own personal best, not try to do the best that another person can do, or trying to look around you for how to calibrate yourself against other people. Trying to calibrate yourself against yourself is one of the biggest skills that somebody can learn professionally and personally, and trying to figure out how to get kids to understand that early so that they don't fall into this trap of feeling competitive with other kids that might be bigger and stronger than them, or that might have an edge on them in another way. Or, I already see it with my daughter. She's really upset because she can't do a split. And she's trying, wants to take gymnastics class, but she wasn't born like a rubber band kid, because I'm not a rubber band kid. And just sort of trying to tell her what her strengths are, and that there's going to be things that are going to be easier for her and things that are going to be harder for her. And just to sort of pay attention to those. And if you really want to learn how to do a split, you just got to, commit and practice to it in a way that maybe another kid might not be able to. But if you want it, you can have it,
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I love the fact that and it's what you can do today too. It's in the moment, going back to that, maybe yesterday I could have done the splits, but today I'm a little tight, so I can't. So I have to, but be willing to accept, to do your best might not be your personal best today. Because I think a lot of times for me personally, it'd be I need 2 hours, and I don't have 2 hours today to work on my art, so I'm just not going to work on my art because I just don't have that time. I mean, that's no way to think about it, right? You need to say, well, I got 10 minutes here, and it might not be, I might be tired, but I'm going to go at it the best way I can. And it's not going to be 10 o'clock when I've got full rest to sleep and I've got a big I've eaten a good breakfast, I got a little bit of exercise, and now I can sit down and create something amazing. No, I don't have that today, but I got this little bit, and, maybe it won't be the best thing in the world that I do, but it'll be the best that I can do today. And I think these books.
Exactly.
And
it gives you, once you start understanding that, you do things like take a sick day. You actually pay attention to what your body needs and how efficient and effective you can be. And you weigh whether you want to move forward. There are days where I'm just like, man, I feel like garbage and I could work on this thing, but it'll take me 3 times as long to work on it than if I just wait, if I give myself the day off and give myself a bath and then come at it fresh, and then I can actually get it all done in this session tomorrow. If you feel like you can have the discipline to actually come back to it, sometimes it's good to just take a break and walk away and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I all of these things are these life lessons that I feel like it takes adults until their 30s and 40s to learn. Everybody goes through this period of just not taking care of themselves as a teenager and 20 something. And it's so weird to think about putting that into a kid's book, because I'm essentially making a kid's book that's also applicable to a 22-year-old. But it's so true. I mean, a lot of these are just these lifetime lessons that we just need to be hammered over the head with, and trying to get them young.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. So talking about this, I think of general questions to do in interviews every once in a while. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is somebody asked me, so, you Nick, I know you like art and I know you like picture books and all that, but what do you do? What do you do besides that? What's your thing? And I looked at them like they were from a different planet because I couldn't answer the question. I'm like, what have I been doing? Have I been, what outside of art have I been doing that is enriching my life? I got my family and, but I couldn't come up with something, and it was quite honestly scary. I'm like, so part of when, talking about this book and part of where I'm at right now, I'm trying to do stupid things not stupid things, but just things that don't have play. I'm trying to play more, right? I'm playing. Yeah. I want to find other interests, whether that's, you could be playing while you're cooking, or, I'm literally playing video games. I haven't picked up video games in a long time, but I'm going to just play video games just to play video games because it's something completely different that I haven't done in years. So I'm going to ask you a question. So besides the art and besides, everything around this, the children's books and being there for other designers and other artists, and what else do you do to just have a full and vibrant life?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. One is I also think it's totally fine not having hobbies as a parent of very tiny kids.
Yes, I agree.
It's so funny because people that don't have kids will be like, what do you do in your free time? And I was like,
there's no free time.
I don't know, you mean the 10 minutes at the end of the day
mm-hmm.
after my kids go to bed and before I go to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not really a lot of free time to do a lot of things. But I'm an extroverted person, so a lot of my enriching my life involves just spending time with people that I find interesting and like and love. And I feel like I end up, when I do have a little bit of free time, just having a pretty rich social life with friends. And now, of course, because I'm an adult person, some of that social life involves going to exercise classes with friends and things like that, trying
mm-hmm.
to double up on things I have to do and versus things I want to do. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm just your average adult that loves going out to dinner and I'm really into teas right now because I can't have any coffee because my body decided to reject caffeine. And I don't know. I feel like I don't have any crazy outstanding hobbies. I'm not a knitter or anything right now, but it's mostly just spending time with people that I find interesting and having good conversations.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I've got 2 final questions for you. and they're very simple. What's next for you?
What's next? Well, my literary agent would very much like a book to be next. But I have to, I think I have a bunch of really great stuff that's coming up. I'm moving my studio from San Francisco to Oakland. I've been building out like my dream studio for the last year, and that's going to be done within the next month, which is crazy. And so I'll be moving my letterpress from my home to my office. And I'm very excited about that. I have a retail space that's in the base of the studio that I eventually hope to have as a retail store. It's not going to be that for at least another year, but that could be on the horizon. And we just bought a house up in Berkeley, and we're going to be renovating that. And that's a whole super fun project of working with an architect and trying to come up with what's going to be my dream house that I want to die in kind of situation. So,
Nice.
yeah, there's definitely a lot going on personally, but also professionally with, interesting projects and just kind of feeling like it's a very sweet time in life right now.
That's great. So, final question is, what's been the best moment of your picture book life?
Best moment of my picture book life? Oh, I'll tell you my favorite moment so far. There's been a lot of great moments. I've actually, it's hard to put together what is my favorite moment because they're favorites for different reasons. Some of the moments that have been the most meaningful to me, and I'm going to try not to get teary with this because I'm like in new mom hormone zone, but also I'm just kind of a teary person in the first place. But I've had multiple people write me to say how impactful the book has been to them. And the ones that have stuck with me the most was I had a NICU nurse write me to tell me how much she loved the book and how she really wanted to buy Tomorrow I'll Be Brave for their whole NICU for all the parents that come in and have these like brand new babies that are just like fighting to stay on Earth. And that was just like so impactful. Whew. And then another one is I had a woman who has an autistic son, and she said basically the same thing for me, that she felt like there weren't a lot of books that really spoke to her son, and felt like they could open up the world to him, just because if you think about books that are like, I'm going to be president someday or whatever. And, that is very appealing and it's awesome to like dream super big, but just to like give kids that might not have every resource in front of them the ability to still appreciate everything that they're able to do. I think that I find that really inspiring if you can't tell. And then, on a super lighter note, the other thing that was really fun was I love doing these school visits, because I do a ton of public speaking to adults, and that's really like very fun and empowering, enriching for me. But I went to a school on my last tour, and I did like a live art demo for them where I just was like, hey, like you think that a letter A looks like this, but what if we make it look like this? And every single time that I put pen to paper, the kids stood up and applauded as if it was like the best thing they've ever seen. And I've like never had a reaction like that to a crowd. It was just like a standing ovation with whooping and clapping for like every single letter that I was drawing. And it was just so funny and so fun. And it made me just, you take for granted like how cool your job is, or just like how easy it is to inspire someone else through what you do. And that just made me feel like just so happy and cool when I had that moment too. That was really fun.
Thank you for listening to the show today. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe to Picturebooking on your podcast app and discover more at Picturebooking.com.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.